We will start open today with a chant. So since we don't have our wooden fish, the wooden fish in here, is it in the Dharma hall?
Meditation
hall.
Suka has a drum.
Okay, so we'll just do it as if you can just hear it in your mind. Ready? Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, when practicing deeply, Paramita illuminated the five aggregates that they are all empty and cross beyond all suffering and diversity. Sariputra, form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. The same is true of feelings, conceptualization, action, and consciousness. Sariputra, emptiness is the characteristic of all dharmas. They do not arise or perish, are not defiled or do not increase or decrease. Therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, conceptualization, action, nor consciousness, no eyes, ears, no sound, body, or mind, no form, sound, smells, taste, touches, or objects of mind, no realm of eyes up to and including no realm of mind consciousness, no avidya, and also no ending of avidya up to and including no aging and death, and also no ending of aging and death, no suffering, no accumulation, no cessation, and no path, no wisdom, also no attainment with nothing to attain. Therefore, bodhisattvas rely on prajna, paramita, and thus their minds have no hindrance. Because there is no hindrance, they have no fear, having forever inverted thinking, in ultimate nirvana. All Buddhas of the three times rely on prajna, paramita, and thereby attain anuttara samyak sambodhi. Therefore, know that prajna paramita is the great supernormal mantra, the great right mantra, the supreme mantra, the unequaled mantra, which can remove all suffering and is true, not false. So recite the prajna paramita mantra, recite the mantra that says Gate, Gate, Para, Gate, Parasamgate, Bodhisattva. And then there was the blessing that Buddha Master gave. I beseech Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva to bless all disciples present here. May all of them, during this time of listening to me, proclaim the absolute truth of liberation through the Heart Sutra, attain the understanding of the absolute truth of the universe and of human life, and realize the state of one who has transcended the ordinary and entered holiness. And so this is almost like you could say, they have these books now that you can order. It gives you sort of like a synopsis of a book. And so you could just get the gist of what a book was about, the salient points and so forth. And I remember when I used to be busy in the world, I didn't have time to read a whole book. I just needed the salient points, and I would subscribe to that service that gave you those book synopsis, and I found that to be very useful. I could call that maybe a quick pass. Certainly, there was perhaps something that I could have learned if I had read the whole book that wasn't in the synopsis. But the important thing was to get, the most important parts, and that would carry you to a certain understanding. And so a lot of Buddha Master's teachings are like this. They're called the quick path because it's skipping over some of the stuff. It's good to know. It's good to have information, and you can always add more to your understanding, but you could also use your own wisdom to know those very things. And so this is a path whereby we learn to activate and to use our own wisdoms. Of course, if we want to take the slow path, we can take the slow path. But I'm just saying, for those like me who don't have that much time left, unless I want to start the cycle all over again, forgetting everything I learned until you run across something, you hear something, and somewhere inside of you, you say, I know that, or I knew that, or it's so familiar, but when? Not in this life, and I didn't discover that until I was 45 years old. And that was something that was part of the rebirth linking consciousness, but it took something here to trigger. It's like having a dormant seed. The seed is still there, it's in you, but it's just not awakened, alive to release its energy until something happens, like pouring water on it, planting it into soil. And so we are not really learning things for the first time. We are awakening to something that we already know. If you could just change your thinking to hold that as a concept, that I am awaking to my intrinsic nature. Not that I'm learning it for the first time. I am awakening to it. There's been some good karma that has been planted that has allowed for the seed to now begin to germinate or to bear fruit. Then you wouldn't feel that there's no way you can get this, because it's reminding you continually that you already have this prajna. You have just not awakened to it or removed all the obscurations so that it can manifest. So if we can agree on that's where we start, we can go forward. If we can't agree on that, then you'll probably have a very difficult time, because you're thinking there's so much I need to know, so much I need to learn, so much and it makes the path more difficult. But more than that, it's just simply it's not true. According to the teachings of the masters who have attained, it's not true. We already possess this as our intrinsic nature. But, and so that means that we can't actually say that we walk in it or as it, because the proof is in the pudding. Walks like a duck, quacks like a duck. So you have to see both sides of that. Yes, I have this intrinsic nature, but because it has not awakened in me, I walk like a duck and quack like a duck. So right now I'm a duck. But what I'm doing is not getting something. I am releasing or bringing something to the surface. And that should give you some confidence in your practice. It also helps you to be able to go through the hard sayings or the hard teachings. He said, when you find a teacher that continually points out your shortcomings, stick with that teacher, because that's the clutter, that's the obscurations, that's the blanket that is obscuring your intrinsic nature and wisdom. And so it's like shining a light on that to that darkness, that piece of darkness, to dispel it, to utterly break it apart, to remove it, to eradicate it. Now, the darkness, that's not you. You are not the darkness, but it is that thing that is covering, that's obscuring, that's holding you down, that's keeping you from being able to see. That's like a cataract in your eye. It's that is what's being what light is being shown upon. It's not you. And so in time, we will change our understanding, and that has to be balanced in a certain way. Because if it's not balanced in a certain way, one starts going, I'm the Buddha. You know, it's not going, I've got this wisdom. And really it's nothing but just their own, you know, exaggerated views of themselves, of their deluded nature. And once one falls into that, it's very difficult to get out of. And so most of us are attached to a false self that is in deep modes of suffering, but we think it's the outer world that's causing us our suffering. The outer world is just an outpicturing of our internal suffering. It's if we look at what is happening in the world and the thoughts that are expressing themselves in the world, the thoughts of rage and the thoughts of violence and the thoughts of hopelessness, all of these things are actually outpicturings of what's in the mind of people. So it's not just happening and people are looking and saying what's happening. People are producing those results by what's in what? Their minds, right. And so we have to have another basis for understanding our mind. And if we have this other basis, what you will see outpictured in the world will be, you know, the fruit of that kind of mind. And we see this kind of suffering that we have, you know, and we see it like from afar, like the suffering of that is perpetrated through having an enemy. But if you roll it on back and bring it closer and closer to yourself, we also see the suffering that is perpetrated through the thoughts we have about friends. If we bring it back even closer, we'll even see the thoughts, the suffering that's caused by the thoughts we have about people that we love, or, you know, and if we bring it back even closer than that, we see the suffering of thoughts that we have even about ourselves. So we're really in a pickle, aren't we? And unless we have some understanding of how to neutralize it, we are not going to be successful in eradicating the suffering in this world. So there are two ways. One is by analyzing, and I think we're always analyzing, you know, but analyzing doesn't seem to be the method by which we can actually uproot it. It's a method by which we can say, yeah, I see how that's caused by that, and that's caused by that, and that's caused by that, and that's caused by that. Yet I still have this feeling, right? I still have this feeling of loss or of fear or of anger or, you know, of sorrow or of grief. You know, analyzing doesn't really eliminate it. So what are we after? Are we after really like intellectually understanding the cause, or were you after uprooting and eliminating? That's in this way one evaluates the Dharma if we want to eliminate as a technology. If we don't, it just becomes a study, something else that we like know, but not anything that has the capacity to transform us out of those states. Because who can lay a hand on a state? Can you grab a mental state? It is it's impossible. It is like empty. It's like you cannot grasp it. So if one wants to move from state to state, they have to have tools or technologies that are not concrete, because the concrete can't grasp that which is insubstantial. Listen to me now. It can't grasp that which is insubstantial. So that means our way of approaching that analytics can only go so far. That you have to have a view of or an understanding of something that moves from a concrete kind of presentation to that which is insubstantial, and yet you know that it is there. You have to apply methods that are as insubstantial as the mind is unconcrete, non-concrete, inconcrete, not concrete. Yeah, I'll use that one. And so that's why when we sit down to meditate or to attain a state of meditation, a state of transcending, that which is concretized and formulated and held tightly in the mind, we're going to have to use a tool that gradually dissolves. I think of it like a mound of hard earth. And hard earth, it can be so hard, it can be almost like concrete. But if you pour warm water on it, it gradually begins to soften, and it gradually begins to dissolve. And the earth kind of washes away with the water. So the water starts to turn brown. It's not that the water changed colors, but that the earth is dissolving and being washed away by the water. And if you could think of your meditation training or creating the opportunity to enter into these sublime states to be like that, one would not expect to go from my ordinary critical thinking mind and way of holding my views or being attached to certain things to suddenly being in this high state of nothingness. It's not possible to make that leap. But gradually, we can make that shift, and we can make that leap. So I want to talk a little bit about, this has been, there's a way that I learned over 20 years. There's a way that I learned about meditation and about the different practices and techniques that I could recite it with my eyes closed and just give you the formula and you go with it. But how many are really, if you look at some of the, from time to time, I go out to the internet and look up some of the other Buddhist websites and see what people are talking about and what they're doing and so forth. And I'll tell you, some of the mind states of Buddhist practitioners are in a lot worse states than people who are studying and practicing, other methods, because whatever it is they're practicing, it's not taking them to the conclusion of what is possible to the taking up of this Dharma. And that's really, it's really, really sad that we are in worse shape than some people who have no practice at all. So I want to, I've been challenged as I'm doing this to not do it in the same way, because if you do it in the same ways that you've always done it, you're going to get what? Going to get the same result. And there's something in particular that every time I start, I keep hearing the words, don't try to steal what you have not earned. And that's the way a Buddha master has been prefacing, everything. And he's saying, you want to be in this state, but you have not developed and you don't qualify to be in this state. And in this country, we all want the hacks. We want, the quick things. We have such a commercial, materialistic kind of idea about everything, including spiritual practice. We don't want to earn it. I remember, and it takes me back to the times when I was living with, I won't say living in the world, because I'm still living in the world, but living with worldly thoughts. I had certain views. One of them was when I was going into a negotiation and I'm prepping myself to win, then I would remind myself, you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. And I would go in there and I would be a crusher, but I have a different view now. Of course, that view cuts me out of certain things, that I could do, because I could do those things and win, but I would actually lose, in accordance with my own great goal, and what I want my life to mean when I have breathed my last breath and I'm about to inherit the fruit of my life. I don't want it to be, you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. I don't want it to be that. And so I had to turn away from that. Did it cost me something? Oh yeah. Cost me not winning certain things in this world or in this life. But to my mind, it didn't cost me anything. Glad to be done with it, But if I have produced enough merit that something can ripen in my life, I might attain the same thing, but without the craftiness, And so that's what I'm talking about. This type of practice calls for a radical honesty. And if we really understand that our capacity to enter into the secret places depends upon the level of our cultivation, then cultivation won't seem like rules. They won't seem like something I'm being forced to do. But if I have the right understanding about cultivation and giving up my selfish ways, I will see the great benefit in them, and they will shift my consciousness. They will change my mind, change my mood, and I'll find happiness and contentment no matter what I'm going through. And then I'll begin to see the more subtler aspects of that. I will begin to see how what I do, I think what I do, that's on me, that affects me. But I'll begin to see how what I do affects others. I will see how when I bring in negativity, how it's not just, and it was just in my mind, now I perfume the whole room with that kind of stink. Or when I'm being selfish, or when I'm being, judgmental, that I'm like sharing that and I'm putting that burden on others. And when one starts to really see it that way, then they're in the place that they can abandon some of the ways that they didn't realize affected other people, so they never even confessed it. In Imparting, there's a chapter on repentance. And it says the minute you know you did something wrong, you need to repent. Repent means a lot more than just saying I'm sorry to somebody or even just thinking I'm sorry. It requires a further act than that. It requires sitting with the uncomfortableness of that realization. It requires sitting with the discomfort that is there when one realizes that they have harmed another or that they have even harmed themselves. Sitting with it to really get the full impact of it. Don't bat it away too quickly. because then we get into the habit of immediately seeing our fault, confessing to ourselves or to others, but and that can get to be a worse habit, confessing to others, because it's like, look at me, I'm so righteous, the minute, or but when we get into that habit, it's a way that we start to really overlook. It's a way of making an excuse for our faults. So I say to you, when you see something, sit with it, get the full impact of it, and then one makes creates the aspiration to not do it again. And then when they're in the moment of that circumstance that causes that habitual way of acting to rise up, don't pretend we don't recognize it, because we do. We recognize our habitual tendencies. We do. It's just that when they are arising, we don't have the fortitude or the will to stop it. So we go ahead and we execute, and then we feel remorseful afterwards. But so I want to talk a little bit about how that factors into our meditation practice. The Buddha says we must constantly be perfecting the 6 paramitas, right? Or in Mahayana Theravada, they call it the 10 paramis. They've sort of broken a couple of them out, but in Mahayana they call them the 6 paramitas. These are called the perfections. These are the perfections, and one of them is virya, and it literally means the state of a strong human. It means energy, persistence, persevering, vigor, effort, diligence, exertion. When something is repeatedly identified as a necessary prerequisite for achieving liberation. It's a mind intent on being ever active, devoted, unshaking, not turning back, and being indefatigable, if that's a word.
Indefatigable.
What?
Indefatigable.
No. And I don't, indefatigable, no, it's easier to say indefatigable, because you understand fatigue. We understand what fatigue is. It is that one does not get fatigued. Okay. And that perfects and realizes what is conducive to the positive. If we just worked at that, can you see the difference that would make in not in our practice? Could you see the difference that would make in our life, in every single interaction that we have with others? Wondering how many, and I'm going to tell you where I got that from. I got that from Wikipedia. So just look it up in Wikipedia, print that out, and put it somewhere, and get these words into your heart and into your mind, because it will help you know what kind of attitude you have to have. Not just knowing something, but you have to have the strength to execute what you know. And it takes cultivating this kind of mind. So if I was saying to myself all the time, I have vigor, I persevere, I can put forth effort, I'm diligent, I can exert myself. These kinds of words will change the way my mind confronts the vicissitudes of life. That's what I'm saying. And then when I hear anything, it says ever active and devoted. We know what devotion is. We know what it is to be devoted to someone or devoted to something. We know what that is. And so this is the kind of attitude that we should have towards our Dharma work, because our Dharma work is only about how to live in the world all worldly Dharma is Buddha Dharma. So I'm gonna read you some things today. These are so wonderful. We will get back to them shortly, but we do have to put some meditation practices into effect. How much? The Buddha said that 90% of our practice should be cultivation and 10% of it meditation. We like the 10% to be cultivation and the 90% to meditation. And one reason we do is because if we sit there and just in a little bit of sitting in silence, laying aside covetousness and grief for the world, we find that it gives us some personal relief, some personal pleasure. And that's what we go for. We want that feeling of release. We want that feeling of relief. We want that personal pleasure. So it's really most of our reasons for meditating is totally selfish, because I just want to feel better inside. It's really like that. It doesn't really have much to do with saving living beings, doing anything for the sake of all beings. It's really personally motivated. And so I want to kind of correct some or broaden our understanding around some of this. Within samsara, living beings at the very least experience the 8 kinds of suffering. There's also the 10 kinds of suffering and various other kinds of suffering. And he goes through all of these, which we're not going to do at this time. Think about it. Where is there no suffering? I will casually illuminate some kinds of suffering you currently live with. There's a suffering of birth, there's a suffering of aging, of sickness, of death, of greed, of hatred and delusion, the suffering of not getting what one wants, the suffering of separation from what or who one loves. Just what is there before your very eyes are not only the 8 kinds of suffering. When a whole family gets together, they're happy. Some disciples say, I'll get married tomorrow. I'm so happy. Some say, my grandson has grown up so much, or my son so-and-so is quite grown up now. You'll think that is something to be happy about, but you must one day part with them. You will leave them, and they will also leave you. The time of happiness is the very time of suffering. No family can be together forever like a never-ending banquet. Here I'm just talking about people. The same principles apply to having things. Hence, once you understand these principles, you should ponder them well. These are the sufferings of birth, aging, sickness, and death, the sufferings of greed, hatred, and delusion, the sufferings of separation from what one loves. When you are in love, the person will part from you. In the end, that person will leave you. Therefore, you will then experience suffering. Greed, hatred, and delusion, not one of them does not entail suffering. With greed, not getting what you desire will cause suffering. If you are overly greedy, you might even violate certain laws. With an angry or hateful mind, you hate others, and yet they may not even know it. There you are, filled with hate. You're so angry that your hairs turn white and your eyebrows and forehead are tightly knit. You yourself seek out this distress. With ignorance, of course, there's even more suffering. Being ignorant, you'll make all kinds of mistakes and will therefore also suffer. The suffering of not getting what you seek is very much a fact of life. So many disciples want to have a peaceful and nice family, good residence, and financial situation they're satisfied with. They even want high and profound Dharma. However, when it turns out that they cannot get what they seek, they feel extremely distressed. Not getting what one seeks will cause one to suffer. This is the case whether one seeks people or things. These are the sufferings of living beings in samsara. But I've only been talking about human beings. There's sufferings in other planes. There's the sufferings in hell are even more frightening. Being a human entails the sufferings, though, that I have just been describing. If you do not get out of samsara, You will continually cycle back and forth. Therefore, you must leave samsara. To leave samsara, you must remove delusion and pursue truth. But then you cannot be attached even to the truth. Only then can you leave samsara. This is the theoretical aspect, but the key is that you still need to cultivate yourself. Only through actual practice can you attain such realization. Living beings are confused about what is true and accept what is false. People fairly believe that their own heart of flesh exists. They believe that all their thoughts are thought by their heart of flesh, or they believe that their consideration of all kinds of problems is completely a function of cerebral nerves. Humans often are confused about what is true and are confused about their own original appearance. After firmly believing in their delusive thoughts, they firmly believe that they have a heart that thinks. They say, without the heart, how can I analyze problems? They always believe that they have a heart that thinks, but this is just a term created. There is no such heart. They made it up. How could there be such a heart? As to the heart that is in our bodies, that heart is unable to think over problems. Thus, ancient people created many obstacles for living beings, especially with respect to this matter of heart being mind. So when you tell them that there's no heart that thinks, then they immediately think, oh, I know, it's the cerebral nerves that think things over. It is due to cerebral nerves that we're now thinking over all of our problems. If the cerebral nerves stop functioning, everything stops functioning. Actually, both the heart as mind and the cerebral nerves as mind are false minds. Both are created out of the delusive thoughts of ordinary people. What is a false mind? A mind that is false and does not have functional power. Both those things, the heart and cerebral nerves, do not have the functional power to think. And so any disciple with that type of thinking has a misconception of the six consciousnesses, which is the mind consciousness. There are the consciousnesses of the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and the sixth is the mind consciousness. And that brings us back to where we were a couple of days ago. So in the Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta number 148, he discusses the six sets of six. And in the six sets of six, he explains how the internal basis, eyes, nose, etc., meet the external basis. They see things, hear sounds, sight, sounds, smells, and so forth. Internal basis meet the external basis. With that, consciousness arises, and the three of those make contact. And with contact comes feeling. Feeling can be pleasant, can be painful, can be neither pleasant nor painful. Internal basis meet external basis. Consciousness arises. The three of those make contact. And with contact comes feeling. Feeling is and the feeling is feeling, tactile, feeling in the sense of body, and that also produces a mental feeling. So the feeling in the body will be pleasant, unpleasant, or neither pleasant nor unpleasant. The feeling of the mind will take us into thoughts of, I like it, I don't like it, I'm ambivalent about it. And ambivalence can be further broken down to I don't care, which is, like you choose, or I'm too lazy to choose, or I don't want to think about it, to it really doesn't matter. Either way, one is the same. The highest of that ambivalent feeling of neither liking nor disliking is when one can accept praise or blame as equally as they accept praise. We like praise, we don't like blame. But whether you're being praised or you're being blamed, you know, if they are the same to you, then you know you're getting there. Loss or gain, when you can win or you can lose. If you can be equally as attached to winning as losing. These are your litmus tests now. Praise or blame, loss or gain, pleasure or pain, fame or shame. So if you just take those 8 and look at your experiences through the lens of those 8, and you can test yourself. I won't say judge yourself, but you can test yourself on where you are in abiding in the middle. Abiding in the middle doesn't mean you mix them and come to a middle point. It means that you can be equally on this side of the fence as on that side of the fence. And that will let you know your level of non-attachment. So we shouldn't fool ourselves or think that we are so non-attached when we're so attached to everything. And he says that whether you're attached to something that is good or feels good is really, really no better than being attached and trying to put away something that is not good or doesn't feel good. Most people are really working on their non-attachment to things that don't feel good or things that are not wholesome. But we also have to work on our attachment to things that feel good and are wholesome, the things that we could actually brag about because we actually have those qualities. Yes, develop the qualities, but one cannot attach to the qualities is what I'm trying to say. And that's one of the great dangers of those who start accelerating and growing in their spiritual practice. And then is that they start having pride in what they are doing right. Now, there is a place for pride, but it should be like a holy kind of pride, not that pride that attaches to the self. Like, I know as much as they know. I'm like, so what if you do? I know more than they know what. So what? Well, so we shouldn't be prideful about these things in that kind of way, or we really miss it. And that's why humility is so important to, and also not feeling like one has to share or base everything on what they know. I constantly have things that I want to share with you based on what I know. And almost every time I come up with something like that, I get knocked down. Because it's like, what do you really know, Panwati? You know, and then I have to wait until something is pointed out that has real value, not just what Panwati thinks has value. And so this is the way of learning until we come to the path of no more learning. And when is that? It's when our wisdom has grown mature and we can fully rely on our wisdom. Why this becomes important to us is because we're trying to enter into certain meditative states. These are not states that are mind controlled. And the teaching is that it is impossible to enter into those states if one has not cured the defects that prevent the entering into those states. And so that's why we have to talk about the defects. And if we understand and cure the defects, we will automatically enter into those states. We can't force our way in. We can't bulldoze our way in to this kind of realization. He says, when one's realization has reached the standard with regard to the phenomena of form, reaching the standard with regard to mental phenomena will naturally be done with ease. The most important thing for us to pay attention to is observing the mind with one pointedness. So this one pointed observation of the mind is no small matter. Not generating any thought, one abides in prajna without descending into muddledness, drowsiness, sleepiness, scattered-mindedness, or unsettledness. One who has realized such a state can naturally attain the ultimate state of a Tathagata. However, one gradually enters this state. It is not a state that can be entered into and realized. This is important for us to remember because we're trying to effort into stillness. And we can't really effort into stillness. No, we apply effort and energy in our what? Yeah, in our cultivation. And when we have applied effort and energy into our cultivation, at those times that we sit, we will enter into those states without effort. And so that's why there's so much frustration in trying to learn meditation practices, because we're trying to force our way into a state that's not our natural. It's not our natural state. It's not our natural way of thinking throughout the day. It's not our natural way of relating to circumstances that rise up or the vicissitudes that come in the course of our life. You know, but when we have a handle on how we will meet those challenges, and the better we get at meeting those challenges, then the more we will ascend into the reality states in meditation. So that's why we pay more attention to the outside. And then when we go to sit, we just sit. And when our hearts and minds are clear, that's when we're in the place where one thought has left and another thought has not arisen. So we have to gradually train the mind to not have an opinion about everything, to not have a thought about everything, to not I tell the story about a woman who was, she was such a busybody and caused so much disturbance in our congregation. So one day I just gave a sermon on busybodiness, and afterwards she came and said, "Oh, Pastor, I was so happy. I was so delighted with your sermon today. I'm glad I'm not a person like that." And so, what could I say? You know, and so I just kind of I said, "Me too," you know, because there wasn't the capacity at that time to see or to hear, to understand or to penetrate. So there's another passage in the Bible that says, "Tolerate the feeble-minded." You don't be feeble-minded, do you? So we have to really give ourselves some credit that we have the capacity to hear. If we didn't get offended by what we heard, when we get offended, we turn off the hearing. You know, but he says, listen, and then examine oneself. Like, is that me? Do I do that? Am I that way? Is my general attitude like that? And when my general attitude is like, this is me, my business inside, and I'm just handling my business in my way, but I'm around others, do I see the harm that I cause? Do I see the obstacle that I create for them, that they now have to deal with my polluted thoughts that I've just breathed into the atmosphere? You know, and when one is earnestly, with vigor, seeking out the answers to those questions, they are able to penetrate and see clearly. When one sees clearly, oh, I see that. I see that. It's not a cause for shame or a cause for blame, but it is to clearly see it and take care of it. You know, and when one does that, we can penetrate and understand the deeper teachings. Sometimes you just can't understand it. I don't care how much somebody talks to you about it. You know, if you haven't done other preliminary work, you can't understand it. I don't care how much, like if you step in the middle of a teaching and you miss the first and the entrance, the introductory to that, and the step before that. So if you miss coming to Sangha, I'm going to tell you, you won't be able to understand the things unless you go back and listen to the ones that you missed, because they're building upon something. And so it becomes important in that way. He says, I am a stone paving your road. I hope that you disciples will use me, this stone paving your road, as a stepping board to gradually step from my body onto the path of liberation and walk that path to its end. That is my wish. I will also make a request to you. From now on, you should care for one another. Do not stir up gossip. Do not slander one another behind their backs. Start with the 4 limitless states of mind. If you cannot do even this, then saving living beings is even more out of the question for you. On this issue, whether you are selfish or have a good state of realization, do not use your mind consciousness of an ordinary person to analyze things. Some people in certain situations become so angry that they even cry their eyes out. Those disciples must immediately repent. My disciples should care for one another, period. Only after you are unselfish can you speak of being selfless. Only after you are selfless can you be free of attachment to phenomena as well. Only then can you enter the state of prajna. Only then will you encounter emptiness. You have to do well in the basic behavior of being a human being. Do not go so far as to lose your focus when listening to the Dhamma because you see other disciples with whom you are not on good terms, or because your attention is pulled away by the karmic force of aversion. Aversion to something being said, aversion to someone who's saying it, aversion to I don't want to hear it. One who is attached to the facial expression of others and even superimposes those things onto one's own learning from Buddha is a person with karmic hindrances, is not a good Buddhist practitioner, and is a foolish and low-level person. You should rely on the Dhamma, not rely on any person or your feelings about any person. Now, isn't it amazing that Buddha Master addresses this in here? Because we can be doing good with our own personal work. We can be doing good with the things that we're trying to eliminate and the things that we're trying to take up. But if we're missing a point, he finds a way to point it out. He almost makes a sandwich, you know, like we want the bread on the bottom and the bread on the top, and he slides that thing that we don't want in between those 2 slices of bread. and forces us to take a look at it. Now, where this comes in is that he was teaching on something else, and then he said, now I want to stop and discuss this right now. Well, that's how I felt when I got back. And I discovered that, you know, like half the Sangha didn't come to Dharma while I was gone. You know, and I thought about how they would feel if it was their loved one and how we should support those who are moving in to teaching capacities. But we have so much, I don't know, pride, arrogance, don't care, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, that we can't make an effort to support them. What is that? It's not right. That's all I'm saying. And that we should think about these things. Not just doing what we want to do when we want to do, but some things we, a good friend, the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha said, does what is hard to do and gives what is hard to give. Now, all this time, I thought that meant does what's hard to do is somebody's asking for a big thing, and like I don't really want to give it. Does what's hard to do, gives what's hard to give. They're asking for something, and it's more than I want to give. I always thought in those ways, but at this moment, I'm holding it in a different way because it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to be that. It has to do with our own propensities, our own preferences. So that's what we're trying to uproot. We're trying to uproot our preferences, because that's what stumbles us and keeps us from penetrating and entering into the deep spaces of dharmic realization is our preferences. He's working on our preferences. We can't work on everything but our preferences. We just hope our preferences, those are mine, they're personal. I don't even get into that aspect of it because I will read you. But that's exactly where he's asking us to look, because those are the secret places that tie us inextricably to our sense of self. It's those little things that make us not even think. Never even occurred in my mind that I am committing an offense just in not supporting, not carrying it up. What if you were the one? How would you feel? You said, well, you need to work on your feelings. Yes, that person does need to work on their feelings, but you also need to work on your thoughts and your actions. This is the way that these are the hard places that we have to go to, and the hard things that we have to look at. We want to save the world, but we can't even give a little bit of encouragement to someone right in our Sangha. And then we come back the next week and we want to enter into emptiness. Sanchi, 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 Sanchi. And so this is, now I'm speaking, I can only speak to you all because you all have the training, you have the cultivation, you all have the capacity to be selfless. I can't speak for other people. I only know the ones that are here. I only know the effort that's being put forth here. I only know about the diligence that's going on here. And I can say that it's really going on. So you have to know that you're growing and that you're developing and that now you're done with the cow's milk and you're ready for strong meat. You have to know that. So thank you for allowing me to say these kinds of things. Now, some people tune in here and there, but they don't have that, like home training. They don't have that kind of training. They have not been brought up in this way. So they hear something and they're grossly offended or they totally disagree, and that's okay. I mean, I can't do anything about that, but I'm telling you how you can break through these barriers of human ordinariness. No matter what's wrong with being an ordinary human. Not a thing if you like samsara. But if you know now that there is a way out, if you can climb yourself up into it, I'm saying, go, go, go. You can do it. That's what I'm saying. And these are the little areas that we have to tighten up, that we have to work on. And so I'm happy that we're in the company. Remember, when he started this, says, I am teaching. Who was he teaching? Yep, but he named some categories of readiness. Dharma kings, arhats. Rinpoches, he says, I'm giving you a teaching. And then he included those who have an affinity with him to be able to hear this, that they are ready. Maybe the outer circumstances have not come to the forefront. That maybe you're in a tradition where they don't have Rinpoches, so you can't be designated a Rinpoche. Maybe you are, so. But he says, if you have there's no way you can hear these teachings if you don't have the karma to hear them, that you're not ready for them. So everyone within the sound of my voice is ready for this, but it's going to take work. We have to arouse virya. And when we talk about some of the other perfections, I very seldom hear anybody talk about arousing, because arousing virya, energy, vigor, determination, arousing those things take something. They require something of us, and we don't know whether we want this just to be a sort of like a knockoff self-development course, or whether we want to really enter into this level. So you won't hear this kind of teaching everywhere. But the thing is, the minute we put something into practice, we actually do reap the benefit of it. Some of us like to babysit our suffering and our pain. We say we don't want it, but we constantly think about it. And he'll say, like, well, one antidote to that is to shift the mind while you're thinking about this. Just change your mind to something else. And we claim we can't do it. Can't do it. But we can do it. We can shift our mind if we want, simply by knowing what is the good qualities and attitudes and behaviors of a holy being. And we're learning what they are. And so we could say to ourselves, I shouldn't think like this, It's me pacifying my wounds, my hurts, my ego, my whatever. I should think like this. And we give ourselves, and just that quickly one can turn one's mind. If we do that as continually as we nurse our wounds, and as continually as we nurse our offenses, it wouldn't be long before our whole mind was consumed with goodness as opposed to consumed with the suffering of our offenses. But it's because we constantly think and ponder on them. We constantly nurse them. We constantly reinforce them, that they constantly appear. That's how we are training our mind to think and respond. And so in this sense, it's not a miracle when we shift. It's just that if we begin to train the mind to think and ponder like this, then our mind will shift and we will think and ponder in that way. And one will immediately begin to experience the goodness that comes with that effort. We will immediately begin to feel still and settled. We will immediately begin to have the notion that I'm able, more than able, to accomplish what concerns me today. I'm able, more than able, to handle anything that comes my way. And so, and then when something does come your way, the inner confidence that I might not like it, I don't like it, but I can accommodate it. And this is how I will accommodate it, is by turning my mind into a different way. Like if I'm fear-ridden about something, it's about facing my fear. What is the worst that could happen? Don't get it, or I don't keep it, or I don't have it, or maybe I can even decide of something else I could have. And in that way, forget about the thing that are that I want that I don't have. We have to be able to use the Dharma to handle our own problems. We have to be able to use the Dharma to change or to shift or to remove, to uproot the defilements of selfishness in our mind. Then that's a person who can say that they give themselves away. That's a person who can say that they give all to the Dharma. That's a person who can run the distance and to go the last mile. That's a person that one can rely upon. Someone says to me, I'm reliable, but if they can't handle their own selfish destructive emotions, how can I rely upon them? How can you rely upon someone who's tossed by, every wave of self-aggrandizement, or what I need, or what I want, or what my view is? Sometimes, if you can see that you can't help shift a person's view, then let them hold their view. Don't uproot their view, and now they're just totally groundless. I mean, you can try to explain or share something that you want, and if they can't grasp it, then one should think, that maybe now is not the time to further, continue this discussion. And you could just leave them with their happiness or their unhappiness, whichever they choose. We can't try to make them accept our view. Person has to have their own reason. And when you can see that being helpful is not helpful because they don't want to enter in that, leave them with their happiness. And when conditions are right for them, there will be another that will come along and water. You don't have to be the one that helps them see. So sometimes a person may feel that they're being what can I say? Ignored or overlooked. Please don't feel that way, But if there is the sharing of something, and I see that there is so much of a resistance to that with you, I'll just leave you with whatever view you have, and maybe another time might be a better time, And he says that this is the wisdom. This is the wisdom of a Buddha. You're not trying to force anything on anybody. But he says, be careful. It's these little things, and how will we, if they don't come up in our mind, how will we know? Sometimes we do something and we have no idea that has troubled the waters. Don't have an idea unless someone tells us. So when they tell us, then maybe we could just say, thank you for sharing that. I'll think about that. One reason that I have so much respect for Joe is that Joe always has an opinion about something. He doesn't have any problems telling you what his opinion is. And when I'm listening and I'm giving Joe something to think about, I'm like, Joe, and then I'll say, and finally he said, oh, I got it. Oh, thank you, Venerable, or something like that, So I find Joe to be very teachable because although I also find him to be the one with the strongest opinion and view, like he doesn't hear it until I say it 5 times. I might have to get louder each time too, but because of his earnestness and his desire really to know, and his recognition of his own shortcomings and his willingness to accommodate my shortcomings, I find that very, he's very teachable in that way. And so that's why I know and how fast his progress is. I think he's learned a lot in the last year. Yeah, you know. But it's because of that quality, that energy, that never giving up, that the tenacity that's made him so strongly hold himself. Now that he's found the Dharma, he's trying to use that tenacity to hold firmly to that Dharma, regardless of what things look like, regardless of, you know, and that's an admirable quality. You see, so so I use him as my litmus on things. So Buddha Master stopped right in the middle of this. He was on the same as true of feelings, conceptualization, action, and consciousness. Like, so he's way into this Heart Sutra, right? But he stops right in the middle. He didn't do this at the beginning, did he? No. He did it in the middle when he's like, okay, guys, we're getting ready to go to another level now. To get to that level, you're going to have to get on this step. And so he stops right in the middle and saying that I want to discuss this with you first before he goes on. And so I just wanted to share that with you. And because you might be wondering what this has to do with meditation, you know, and what it has to do with meditation is that we need to go back and do a little bit of more housekeeping, and in terms of our attitude and in terms of our love for one another. In Sutta number 128, he's with a group of disciples and they are arguing or bickering over something, and one is holding, and they have different teachers within that community, and one teacher was old, and I think he went to the bathroom and made like a mess in the bathroom. I don't know what a bathroom was, missed a pot or something, and another a disciple of one of the other teachers went in and saw it and began to talk about him, you know, and so then that caused these two factions to arise between his students and the other disciples' students. And the Buddha was there at the time, and he said, you know, this is unseemly talk. You all shouldn't quarrel like this. And they said, Buddha, you stay out of it. We got this. Yeah. So he stepped back. And then, you know, it started getting bigger, one passing on a rumor to another about this. And he came and said, no, we shouldn't do this. And they said, we already told you, you know, this is actually our community. Buddha was visiting them. He said, this is our community. We will handle our affairs. So the Buddha stepped back. Now, this is the Buddha. And then for the next day, it was continued on. And so for the third time, he went to them. And they told him the same thing. He didn't say anything. But he just got his bowl and his robe, and he left. He left them with that. If that's what they wanted to do, he left them with that. And so he goes down the road, and there's another group of his disciples in a grove studying, and he starts to go in there, and they have somebody watching out. Listen to me. They have somebody watching. And they're saying, oh, sir, don't go in. Those are Shakyamuni Buddha's disciples. He said, they are, like practicing deeply. Don't disturb them. And when Anuruddha heard the person, he stopped him and he said, oh, that's our teacher, let him in. And so Shakyamuni comes in and he asks them, how are they getting along? He says, oh, we're blending like milk and water. He says, well, how do you do that? You know, and he began to tell them how they blended like milk and water. You know, if one wakes up early, he goes out on alms rounds and brings food. When one sees that one is gone on alms round, he starts setting the table. When they come back and they have meal, if somebody now is out late or they're meditating, they have their meal, and if there's no food left for him when he comes out, he just cleans up their stuff. He didn't say you didn't save me any food. He says he cleans up their stuff. He's happy that they ate. He takes his own responsibility for not being there when the mealtime was. You know, I mean, these kinds of ways. Can you see what a deep training this is? This is the training. This is where the training goes on that produces results, so that when we sit, we cross these boundaries and we enter into these kinds of spaces. We don't get them for free. They cost something. And so then he says, and he says, we cherish one another. We think of when one wants to do something and someone wants to do something else, then each one of us thinks, why should I do what I want to do? Having the pleasure of being in the company of these, my fellow disciples, why don't I do what they want to do instead of what I want to do? He says, and then we do what the other wants to do. No. These are the ways. I mean, we know that the Dharma hall has to be kept clean. How many have come in here and cleaned the Dharma hall? You know, so the same ones just take on the job. But I'm just saying, this is things that I'm ashamed to even talk about. But yet I have to talk about them. And so he says, oh, good. So he asked those preliminary questions to see how they were on one accord with one another before he went into the deep teaching. So he asked, and then how's your meditation? Now he asks, how's the meditation? After all those other questions of how you're treating one another, mutually in accord, you know, sharing the labor that has to be done, create the space for you to be here, you know, yeah. Then he asks, how's your meditation? And this is, oh, meditation's going pretty good too. He says, well, are you seeing any visions or, you know, forms in your meditation? I said, yeah, we see some here and there. He says, and then what happens? He said, then they disappear. He said, why is that? He says, we don't know the reason for that. He said, you should know the reason. And he says, and when I was just an unenlightened bodhisattva, I too saw signs and visions of forms. And then they would disappear. And I wondered, what is the cause for that? And I examined myself. And I realized that this arose in me. You might say pride arose. Another time he said, so I shall train, not I shall meditate so that, but I shall train so that that doesn't arise in me again. I just, to just send across the transmission, I'm just going to read this one little section. What did I say, 128? I think that's, so after he'd asked all these questions of how we're living in accord, mutual appreciation, without disputing, blending like milk and water, viewing each other with kindly eyes. He said, good, Anuruddha. I hope that you all abide diligent, ardent, and resolute. He said, yeah, we do. He said, how do we do that? He said, whichever of us returns first from the village with alms food, pays the seat, sets out water for drinking and washing, and puts the refuse bucket in place. Whichever of us returns last, eats any food that's left over. Otherwise, he throws it away where there's no greenery or drops or drops it into water where there's no life. He puts away the seats and the water for drinking and for washing. He puts away the refuse bucket after washing it, and he sweeps out the refectory. Whoever notices that the pots of water for drinking, washing, or latrine are low, empties them and takes care of that. If they're too heavy, he calls for someone else by a signal of the hand, and they move it by joining hands. They don't even have to break out in speech. But every 5 days, we sit together all night discussing the Dharma. That's how we abide diligent, ardent, and resolute. Good, good, Anuruddha. But while you abide thus, diligent, ardent, and resolute, have you attained any superhuman states, a distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones, a comfortable abiding? He said, yes, venerable sir. As we abide here, diligent, ardent, and resolute, we perceive both light and vision of forms. Soon afterwards, the light and vision of forms disappear, but we have not discovered the cause for that. You should discover the cause for that, Anuruddha. Before my enlightenment, while I was still only an unenlightened bodhisattva, I too perceived both light and a vision of forms. And soon after, the light and the vision of forms disappeared. And I thought, what is the cause and condition why the light and the vision of forms have disappeared? And then I considered thus, doubt arose in me. And because of doubt, my concentration fell away. And when my concentration fell away, the light and the vision of forms disappeared. So I shall so act that doubt will not arise in me again. And he didn't name what the doubt was. There could be the doubt of, is this real? The doubt of, am I, do I deserve this? The doubt, whatever doubt arises in you, you have to stop and deal with the doubt. It says, and Anuruddha, I was abiding diligent, ardent, and resolute, and I perceived both light and vision of form. So now he's really talking about entering into these states, and he says, and then I considered thus, and then they disappeared. And I considered thus, that means I reflected on what happened at that moment that caused what was arising to disappear. He says, inattention arose in me. And because of inattention, my concentration fell away. You could say the inattention could be like not giving enough ease. When you're focused on something and you're really giving the energy to it to be engaged with it, but then if your energy slacks off, you become inattentive. Sometimes you don't even know that you are no longer paying attention. It just kind of like the energy went down and you kind of lost your focus or lost your attention. And so you have to look very deeply to see these kinds of things. So this is what is happening in his meditation. This is the Buddha talking. And he said, inattention arose in me. And the visions of forms disappeared. So I shall act that neither doubt nor inattention will arise in me. So now he's figuring out his antidotes, you see. He says, and then another time, sloth and torpor arose in me. Again, that has to do with not holding enough physical energy to stay attentive to what you're doing. And for that, one antidote might be shorten your time periods. Because if you get in a period of saying, I'm going to meditate for 30 minutes, and you end up sleeping 20 of those 30 minutes every time, you're reinforcing that, the very thing that you're trying to uproot. So it's better to have 3 minutes of quality meditation than 3 hours of intermittent napping, so, and so now he says, and he was trying to sustain let the vision of light and form come to its completion, right? He's trying to move more fully into that, forgetting about the self, entering into this illusory kind of space. And that's, now, is he analyzing? He said the vision of light and forms did what? How they arose. He didn't analyze them into place. He wasn't creating them something in his mind. It arose. So that's why Buddha Master teaches us think about things like they are a dream, an illusion, a bubble. Just not clinging so tightly to something. just holding it loosely, and you'll start to move from those spaces of concrete form to formlessness, because emptiness is at the basis of all form. That's not something that can be intellectually apprehended, but it can be experienced. It can be known. So he said, so now I shall practice, so that he names them all. Doubt, inattentiveness, sloth, and torpor will not arise in me. And then he goes on, another time I was abiding, and something happened, and I looked at what took my attention away. Fear. Fear arose in me. Like, I'm going to give up something. It's going to cost me something. I'm not going to let, like, somebody like this run over me, and you'll get a flashback from something happening in your life that pops in there, and then you start thinking about that. And if I act in this way, they'll just run all over me, or they'll use me, they'll take advantage of me. They'll, and you'll come up with all your reasons why. Well, don't you have to take care of yourself? Or don't, yeah, but how much do you need to really do that? How much? There's four of us that make it possible for these doors to be open. Not the ones who come, but it's 4 of us that do that, month after month after month after month. And I don't mind. I don't mind till I die. And all I have is Social Security. Thank goodness I live with Kay for free, because I can then take that money and keep these doors open for you to come here to Dharma. But I sure want to know that you want to hear it, and that you're going to put it into practice. Otherwise, why do we do this? I'm just talking real talk now. Because worldly Dharma is Buddha Dharma. It's where we need it, here in this world. He says, Anuruddha, another time fear rose in me, and because of fear, my concentration fell away. What if I had the fear that, if I do this and that, how will next month's mortgage get paid, or next month's lease get paid? I never think about it. I never think about how it get paid. As long as I have anything to give, I give it. When I don't, the door's closed. I mean, I don't have to think about it, is what I'm saying to you. You don't have to have, because that's a mental thing. And so we don't have to think so much about these mental things. It's when one is executing in a proper order, then one can accept the consequences of however it falls out. One can be with that, But in the meantime, they're not just thinking; they're in action at what they're doing. So it says, I consider I shall so act that neither inattention, nor sloth or torpor, nor fear will arise in me. And then he says, another time my concentration fell away, and the light and vision of forms disappeared. And he said, suppose a man seeking one entrance to a hidden treasure came all at once upon 5 entrances to a hidden treasure. Then elation would arise in him because of that. So too, one time when I was meditating, elation arose, and the light and vision of forms disappeared. And then another time, inertia arose. And another time, excess of energy arose, And so we start talking about things. Are we feeling Kundalini rising and all of that, It was the excess energy. That's all. And because of the excess energy, my concentration fell away. But now, if I've been taught that, when all of this energy is flowing, like I'm in some high spiritual state, then I'm going to be questing for the high spiritual state, you see. And then we miss, we miss something. He said, and then another time, deficiency of energy arose in me. And that could simply mean now's not the time to meditate. Just stop. Or you get up and go wash your face if you really want to do it, and come back and sit down. I've been working particularly, and I'm using this right now to examine what's arising in me. This is how I am using this chapter, and that's why I'm sharing it with you, been my favorite chapter for a long time. But you know, you go back 3 years later and you read the chapter. I hope you're not at the same place you were 3 years ago, right? You have advanced some, so then you start seeing things you didn't see before, or you start understanding it in a little different way than you understood it before. That's why he says repetition is good. 7 times you need to go through my teaching before you'll be able to understand even an inkling of it. You know, so I've been doing that. I've been working on diligence and deficiency of energy. And when I get ready to do something and I have a choice of doing my meditation maybe, or watching The Mentalist. I'm getting so good, like I hardly watch it now, you know, and I think I'm on maybe the 69th or the 70th time I've watched the series. And I think I've gotten just about all I can get from it. I don't know what that is. But even now, sometimes I'm getting ready and I'm like, I'm gonna watch 2 episodes of The Mentalist, then I'm gonna do my meditation. And what I'm doing now is putting it before the Mentalist. That's my token effort, because sometimes I've done all day, every day, Dharma work. Oh, I'm a professional Dharma worker. You know, all day, every day is Dharma work. Every conversation is Dharma conversation. Not every thought, but every opposing thought, because I have a thought that's a Panyawadi thought, and then I bring up an opposing Dharma thought. So half of my day is opposing Dharma thoughts to Panyawadi's thoughts. So it's like Dharma 24/7. You know, I sleep a few hours at night, and then every dream I have, almost every dream, is some kind of Dharma related dream. I'm like, take a break right now, you know. And so my one break is The Mentalist. And but now I am working at overcoming whatever my objection is to that hinders or opposes my aspiration. You see, because I want to get somewhere, but the thing is, I know I can. That's why you have to know that you can. And when you know that you can, then you know why you have to work with your limiting views and your self-centered thoughts. And it becomes great to be in this place. Ignorance is not bliss. And so he went on, I think it was something like 20 different ones. I mean, this goes on for pages and pages, pages and pages. The sum total word, these were the imperfections of his mind that he had to uproot. Doubt, inattention, sloth and torpor, fear, elation, inertia, excess energy, deficiency of energy, longing, a perception of diversity, excessive meditation upon forms, and those are the ones that he mentioned. And he said, and then thereupon, Anuruddha, I developed concentration with applied thought and sustained thought. I developed concentration without applied thought, but with sustained thought only. Then I developed concentration without applied thought or sustained thought. Then I developed concentration with rapture, then without rapture, then concentration accompanied by enjoyment, and then by equanimity. And when, Anuruddha, I had developed concentration, or as Buddha Master calls it, boundless generosity. That's what equanimity is. It ain't like nothing's worrying me. It's that my sense of caring for everything and everybody has expanded to include the whole world. He says, then when I had developed concentration accompanied by, I'll just say, the boundless generosity, knowledge and vision arose in me thus. My deliverance is unshakable. This is my last forced birth because of cause and condition. there is now no renewal of this being. See? So, but you see how he started with something as simple as concentrating, and then he gave techniques. He gave he said, and I'll tell you what object I concentrated on. I concentrated on the breath. And then he explained how he concentrated on that breath. But then he taught at least 40 other meditation objects that one could account. Now, the reason why he chose the breath is because, it's 2:42. 1:42, it's time to quit. So the reason why he taught the breath is because the more you focus on the breath, I'm gonna close now, because next week when we come, I want you all to think about these things that I talked about. Get all of that straightened out, because we're gonna go into meditation. And I can tell you, even in one sitting, something can happen when all hearts and minds are clear. But what was I saying just before that? Thank you, Suka. Why he chose the breath, because the more you focus on the breath, the less definitive it is. Anything else you focus on, like I can make this my object of meditation, but the more I look on that, the more I will pick up every characteristic and quality of that, right? Until I can just see that, and when I close my eyes, I can see it because I'm focusing on it. But when you focus on the breath, it becomes finer and finer and finer and finer until it's as if there is no breath. So when that happens, we do that to bring it back. He says, don't do that. Stay there. It may even feel scary to you to stay there, because you're posited at that doorway, that interdimensional doorway. So a lot of people get a lot of fear at a certain point in this city. When they start to see forms and visions of forms, they get scary, they come out. But this is the dissolving of the barriers between the dimensions. And if you get this right, and the conditions sustain your practice, your concentration, there is no way not to ascend, descend, stay stationary, but enter into the interdimensions. And one will know for oneself, form is none other than emptiness, and emptiness is none other than forms. Now, this is the quick path. If you don't get that, you can go buy 10,000 Buddhist books on how to meditate. But if you can hold the things that we've talked about the last 3 classes, if you can recall them, if you don't recall them, listen to them again, because I'm trying to shift your mind and how you think about what meditation is and how to enter into it, not through analysis, which will be limited by our mental, capacities and the 6 sense gates, right? Then one will easily enter into the first jhana. And that's why it's accompanied with PT and Sukha, because it's such a profound experience, and it's available to you. Thank you for listening today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable Nawadi.
May the benefit of our practice here today benefit all living beings. May all beings stay far away from greed and anger. An endless generosity in their hearts for other beings, for fellow beings. Equanimity without bias for all beings, and may I model that. Thank you. Have a different begin. Quite a group. Quite serious. Oh, man, that's wonderful. Yeah. And then even the follow-up dialogue that happens in email. It's quite hard. Yeah. Yeah. I'm surprised what that kind of thing was. Yeah.